This is Statutes versus Indigenous Culture, navigating the legal dynamics and indigenous rights within North America. The objectives is to explore why the Indian Removal Act of 1830 was passed and how it affected the Native American tribes and what it meant for their way of life. Examining the Religious Freedom Restoration Act of 1993, exploring the legal significance, impact on religious liberties, and how it shaped the First Amendment Free Exercise Clause, as well as the significance of the Higher Education Act of 1998 and the legal importance within the education system. But what's the importance of a statute? Well, according to Black's Law Dictionary, the fourth edition, a statute is an act of the legislator declaring, commanding, or prohibiting something, or a particular law that has been enacted and established by the will of the legislative department of the government, or the written will of the legislator, solemnly expressed according to the forms necessary to constitute the law of the state. They are important in law, but they are also important to Native Americans and are vital as they provide legal mechanisms for recognizing tribal sovereignty, preserving the cultural heritage, and addressing different types of injustices and ensuring the protection and empowerment for Indigenous communities. A critical statute is the Indian Removal Act of 1830. This was enacted in order to ensure that the Native Americans were gone from their land in order to satisfy the westward expansion for the newly formed at the time United States of America and for their economic growth was really pushed forward by former President Andrew Jackson as he enforced the removal of what they coined and termed during this time period the civilized tribes, which were usually categorized as Chickasaw, Choctaw, Seminole, Creek, and Cherokee Indians in the year of 1830. And most of these people were not only forced off their land, but a lot of them were forced very far, all the way past the Mississippi River. These tribes were forcibly removed by the United States military in a series of mass relocations, and the civilized tribes became known. When they were removed, they called it the Trail of Tears. And although this was driven by the manifest destiny doctrine for westward expansion, some tribes were in contract to be removed off the lands, and in return the United States promised them things like land and things of value like that, but some way somehow that was not effectively applied. Most people would probably argue at this point in time the due process of law might not have really been effectively implemented along the forced removal of these tribes off of their land. Some say that these procedural rights should have been enacted in another type of way. But the 14th Amendment does say, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. And they definitely considered the land their property. And what's more, the effects on cultural practice are vast, because we already know it had a really tremendous effect on tribal and cultural practices even up until today's time, with the forced displacement and loss of their traditional lands and just how their whole state of being was disrupted. However, the fact that some tribes agreed to remove to the removal based on promises to protect him by the government is very interesting to me because some Indians agreed to relinquish their lands east of the Mississippi, and in return, they would get the in fee simple to them and their descendants. However, not all people got what they were promised. Okay, next key statute, Religious Freedom Restoration Act of 1993, also known as RFRA, which was passed by Congress and signed by former President Bill Clinton in 1993 to protect the religious liberties by restricting the government interference unless it was justified by what they considered a compelling interest. RFRA was enacted to restore and strengthen protections for religious freedom, responding to limitations set by a Supreme Court decision in response to the Employment Division versus Smith case of 1990. And the RFRA statute will prohibit government actions that substantially burden religious exercise unless there is a compelling interest, unless restrictive means are used. So some of the cultural practices and effects that we've seen with RFRA is, keep in mind, this statute is mainly meant to make sure its goal was really to prevent laws that would burden a person's free exercise of religion, as stated in the First Amendment. And as of today, this act still continues to uphold its natural validity and renewed vigor. There was a recent case of a case that went to the Supreme Court by the name of United States versus Mitchell. And then within this case, there were some people who were Native American who were called to be jurors. However, these people felt that they just could not put aside their, let's just say, their cultural and religious practice to be the most effective juror. And that was mainly due to the fact that this person in this case was up for the death penalty. So RFRA came in and supported them. So this was just the time when the Religious Freedom Restoration Act wasn't violated by those Navajo jurors deciding to uphold their religious and cultural practice to say, hey, we don't believe in the death penalty, so this isn't something that I can do. I can't just put aside my religious feelings about this person with the death penalty. With the Higher Education Act of 1998, this was passed by Congress and also signed by President former Bill Clinton. And the goal was to include tribal colleges under Title V and make sure they were included along with the historically black colleges. This act was meant to strengthen higher education through the financial assistance, support for institutions, and accountability measures. This impacted colleges and universities and students across the country as it addressed challenges in higher education, aiming to access more affordability and accountability within the higher education system. And also, the whole goal was also to help support those tribal colleges to get more funding so that the history of the Native peoples could be more well presented as the history of, let's just say, the United States. So this was a very important act that was signed in 1998. Within this Higher Education Act, it was actually formally signed in 1965, but the 1998 was an amendment by Bill Clinton. And this was an important, significant time because this is during a time way after the self-determination era. This is also during a time period where everything in general is starting to shift within just the United States of America and the whole world as a whole. So the fact that the Higher Education um, Act of 1965 was amended during this time period is very and crucial, as we're seeing more and more people that, no matter what background they are, start to attend colleges, and more people are starting to also wonder at the same time about the history of North America and the world in general. So this amendment came just in time. And with that being said, the fact that these tribal colleges have received more funding from the government as well as these historically backed colleges is just a testament to how this actually puts more awareness on Native American and Indian culture in general. Because the more funding something gets within any type of education, the more attention it gets. Lastly, we have the Native American Languages Act of 1990, as well as ARFA. So this was created to preserve, once again, something else that was coming up around in this same time period. There's something significant about this time period. And I don't even want to say Native American culture anymore. I want to say more like North America history and culture. This was created to preserve, protect, and promote the rights of Native American languages. So that means everything from the languages to the writing to the historic artifacts, um, even the fact that supporting the languages being learned elsewhere and other various types of education, including elementary, because it upheld the uniqueness of tribal language. Tribal language is very unique. I speak English. I'm also learning other types of, excuse me, old Native American languages, and it is supported by the Higher Education Act of 1978. So one thing I'm finding here during this time period is most of these statutes that were put in to help support Native Americans, they're all very, very similar. They're all there to preserve and protect something about the Native American culture. So that is one thing I feel sets this time period aside from the earlier time periods, like especially during for example, maybe during the early time period of let's just say the reorganization period. And one thing I find significant about this is that it also supports the languages in general, and everything about the Native American is very much articulated and supported by the American Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Okay, and the American Indian Religious Freedom Act of 1978, which is ARFA, also very, very similar to, once again, just protect the preservation of traditional religions of Native Americans. Okay, in conclusion, just the exploration of these statutory laws, well, they've highlighted the exploration of the significance and what they've done and what they will continue to do, and how this has had a major impact of people in North America of Native descent. And this awareness will continue to just, I believe, blossom forward with the rights of sovereignty that we hold, and working towards a future that is even more supported by acts and statutes that are passed to uphold what, let's just say, North America was built upon.